We really appreciate everybody coming out this morning in remembrance of those who passed away 10 years ago this Sunday. So we really want to take a moment and remember them. When you think about the time that's passed since then, a lot has changed in the world, but their lives stand still in our memories, and we want to make sure that we honor those today, and we'll be able to hear from one of those survivors of the crash, Dr. John Crow, coming up. Faculty, staff, and students and community members, thank you for being here. Our Board of Trustees is having their meeting this week, and thank you for taking part of this ceremony and all you do for the university. Our faculty and staff, thank you for taking care of our students and doing all the great things that you do. Our community here in Kirksville has been outstanding and wonderful in support. I see our first responders here today. Thank you for all that you do, and other members of the community. Flight 5966, 10th Anniversary Remembrance Ceremony. Today we gather to advance a university initiative 10 years in the making, an initiative to promote the practice of compassion and humanism in medicine, specifically the teaching of humanistic medicine to ATSU students, our nation's future healthcare professionals. We are also gathered to remember our colleagues who dedicated their life's work to patient-centered healthcare and making a difference in the delivery of healthcare to patients across the globe. The lapel pin you received today will serve as a symbol of our university's commitment to compassion and humanism. It is my pleasure to introduce Student Dr. Addison Roberts, member of the KCM class of 2016 and Vice President of ATSU's University Student Association, who will share a student's perspective regarding the importance of practicing compassion and humanism in healthcare.
Okay, so public speaking is not my strong point, so I borrowed a little story from God's Hotel. It's written by Victoria Sweet. I learned a lot from Dr. Curtis, but it was the case of the missing shoes that he taught me the most about caring, time, and inefficiency. On this particular day, I met him by accident in the wide, widowed corridor that ran the length of the hospital and connected all the wards. He was in a hurry. Where was he going, I asked. Back to the rehabilitation ward, he said, where he was covering for a few weeks. The rehabilitation ward, like the admitting ward, was on its own mini hospital from Laguna Honda. It admitted the patients with milder strokes and less traumatic head injuries, most of whom would recover and be discharged back to their homes, if they had them, although its patients, too, were often without friends, money, or health insurance. Like the admitting ward, it had its own physicians to admit, examine, and discharge its patients, and this month, Dr. Curtis was one of them. He just returned from outside the hospital. He told me he was headed back to the patient who had been having rehabilitated after a stroke, had been ready for discharge for months. But every day when Dr. Curtis made his rounds, checking on his 36 patients in the ward, his patients were still there, still zipping around in his wheelchair, still going to therapy. Finally, Dr. Curtis said, I asked him, why, since he is able to walk, was he still here? Why was he still in a wheelchair? Why hadn't he been discharged? No shoes, Doc. They ordered me special shoes, but they were waiting for Medicaid to approve them. How long had they been waiting, Dr. Curtis asked. 3 months. Dr. Curtis thought a bit. What size shoe do you wear? Size 9. Dr. Curtis reflected for a while. He thought about his duties, his other patients, his charts he had to dictate, the quality assurance forms he had to fill out, and then he left the hospital, got in his car, and drove to Walmart, where he bought a pair of size 9 running shoes for $16.99. He'd just come back with the shoes, and he was going over the ward to put them on the patient and write them the discharge orders. Was he planning to submit his receipt for reimbursement, I asked? He just laughed. As I watched him hurry back to the rehabilitation ward, I wondered why had Dr. Curtis done this? Why hadn't anyone else? It was a simple thing to do, but it never would have occurred to me to do it. I would have been frustrated with the shoe delay, of course, and I would have filled out a second or even third Medicaid request. I might have even written Medicaid or braved its phone tree to complain about the time that the pair of shoes was taking. But it would have never occurred to me to go to Walmart and buy the patient shoes. I had too much to do, too many forms to fill out, too many other patients to see. It would have meant crossing a kind of inefficiency boundary. And yet, Dr. Curtis got in his car without much questioning, and he was hurrying back to the ward with the shoes to put them on the patient himself. He reminded me of an aphorism I love but had never understood. The secret in the care of the patient is in the caring for the patient. I always assumed that it meant caring about the patient, loving or at least liking the patient. But when I saw Dr. Curtis rushing off to put shoes on a patient he barely knew, I thought there must be more to it than that. So I tracked down the quote and found it in a talk by Dr. Francis Peabody to the graduating medical class of Harvard in 1927. It turned out that Dr. Peabody didn't mean caring about a patient, but caring for a patient, which he explained meant doing the little things, the little personal things that nurses usually do. Adjusting a patient's bedclothes, giving him sips of water. That took time, Dr. Peabody admitted, and wasn't perhaps the most efficient way for doctors to spend their time, but it was worth it. He told his students because that kind of time, costly caring, was what occurred, the personal relationships between the patient and the doctor, and that relationship was a secret of healing. Thank you.
Thank you, Edison. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Scott Drew, KCUM alum and Chair of the University Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Dr. Phelps. On October 19th, 2004, Corporate Airlines Flight 5966 departed St. Louis, Missouri en route to Kirksville with 13 souls aboard. Among those passengers were regional assistant deans, their administrative assistants, and 2 fellows from the Arnold P. Gold Foundation, each of whom was traveling to Missouri, to our campus, to participate in a one-day Humanism in Medicine conference. And these dedicated healthcare professionals plan to explore ways for ATSU to become a more compassionate and a more caring campus, and to instill deeper compassion and empathy in our relationships with one another, our relationships with patients, the way ATSU educates and serves students, the manner in which ATSU organizes and delivers our curriculum to students, and the way we respond to one another in times of need. Tragically, Flight 5966 crashed just outside of the Kirksville Regional Airport and claimed the lives of all but 2 of those passengers on board. When I was asked to make some remembrance about this, I went online and tried to find out who these people were. And they were like us. They were dedicated to ATSU, and they were a cross-section of our country. They were men and women. They were married, single, divorced. They were Christian and Jew, and they were young and old. There was even a man named John. They were like all of us. Now let us pay tribute to those on board Flight 5966. Clark Adder, DO, 94. Judith Diffenderver, DO. Kathleen Gabbard, Coordinator for the KCUM Ohio region. Terry Sarantino, KCUM Ohio region. Mark Veridin, DO, 84. Bridget Warner, Wagner, DO. Stephen Miller, MD, from the Arnold Gold Foundation. Richard Sarkin, MD. And also on the plane, Rada Bronson, Matthew Johnson, Paul Talley, Kim Sass, and Jonathan Palmer. Let us take a moment in silence and remember these individuals. I would like to invite Stan East and members of the emergency responders for Flight 5966 to present the wreath of remembrance and honoring the souls lost that day. And a heartfelt thanks to our emergency responders for their service in this and every tragedy in which they serve us. Dr. Phelps.
Thank you, Dr. Drew. As we gather today in remembrance of our colleagues who perished on Flight 5966, we also stand here today grateful for two surviving members of our ATSU family. Dr. John Krogh, who is with us today with his wife and daughter, former KCUM anatomy professor and regional assistant dean for the KCUM Utah region, and other survivor, Wendy Bonham, who is not here today, coordinator of the KCUM Utah region. We are honored to have Dr. Krogh with us today to share a few words in support of our endeavors to create a compassionate campus and community for all. Dr. Krogh, if you'll come forward. I'll also, yes. Dr. Krogh was one of my professors at KCOM, and he was a wonderful, wonderful professor who taught me to grow in ways other than learning anatomy, which was extremely important. Dr. Krogh had a contest with Dr. Mock, who you probably may know, some of you from this area, and they had a challenge to see who could learn all the names of the new students the quickest. And literally, I can remember that first week standing in the anatomy lab, and I hear this voice, Craig. I go, who? Am I in trouble? What is that? You know. And Dr. Krogh was there to welcome me, and as he did all of the members of that first year class. Dr. Krogh, thank you for being here today. We appreciate it.
I guess it's still my responsibility to correct my students, and I have to do that right now because he did make one error. Wendy Bonham is here today. Wendy, stand up, please. I just met her a few minutes ago as she walked up in the crowd, and we greeted each other. And look at her; she's still as beautiful as she ever was. You know, we've come to honor those people who perished in that plane crash. But you know, there's something I would like to do today in my remarks. I'd like to say some things directed toward the families of those people who perished, because when I was in the hospital in intensive care, they kept the media away from me. I didn't have a chance to talk to anybody but my own family. Now later the faculty members came and saw me. Some of them, like Orrin Mock, came every day to see me, but others were not able to come and see me. And I had this need to say some things to those families. I now have a chance to say those things, finally. I don't know why these people perished. I know in tragedies like this, people often say, why did this happen? Why would God allow this to happen? And I don't know the answer to that why. I do know that there is a loving God who is concerned for us and gives us all of our opportunities that we need. I also know through my spiritual experiences of a lifetime that there is life beyond this life. I'm convinced that we will, at some point in time, meet with those people again, as well as our own families. I'm convinced of that, as sure as I am that beyond those clouds the sun is shining today. But I have something to say about the how of that plane crash. I guess that's the way to say this, but I know now why I survived, and I'd like the people of those families to understand this. It wasn't that I was especially strong or smart. I was very fortunate, and I think Wendy would agree that we were very fortunate. Wendy survived. She was sitting on the left-hand side of the plane above the wing on that side. I was sitting on the right-hand side above the wing. We had no clue ahead of time that there was to be a crash. We didn't know we were too low or we were off course. We didn't have any idea about that. All of a sudden there was this crash. the wings were torn off first. That was the first sound we heard. And then some terrific turbulence and then darkness as we were unconscious. When that first crash occurred and that wing was torn off on her side, her wing was attached to the fuselage and her seat was attached to that same mechanism. The removal of that wing turned her seat around backwards. She said later that she couldn't understand why, but when she finally came to, instead of facing forward, she was facing backwards. Her seat had been turned around. So the initial impact of the wing turned her seat backwards, and then the really severe impact that caused everybody else's head to go forward and hit the seat in front of them and killed most all of them. That caused her to move backwards in her seat because she was backwards. And the cushion of the seat saved her life. For my part, I've always had a habit of sitting for a while and then crossing my leg. It's a funny thing, but that's what saved my life. I had crossed my legs. My left knee was up against the seat in front of me. There was not much room in there, and I'm fairly tall. And I had my knee against the seat in front of me. So the impact that I felt was distributed between my head and my knee. I broke my hip in the impact. It knocked me out, but the impact didn't kill me. I have some more things I could say about how we got out. I appreciate very much the first responders. You know, I can remember lying on the ground after we had dived out of that plane. The plane was 14 feet up in the air, and we had to dive out. I guess I dove out head first because my hip was broken. I didn't want to land on my bad leg. I don't know. Wendy also followed me out, and I guess she saw me do sort of a swan dive, and she wanted to better it, I guess. I don't know. But she said she didn't know why she went out head first either, but we both did. But the first responders came, and I can remember Troy Mihalovich saying, when he heard my name, he said, "I used to wrestle on the Kirksville High School wrestling team with your son." You know, that was the beginning of an outpouring of compassion that I will never forget. In this hospital, I saw the faces of my former students, the staff, the nursing staff. Physicians in the community were assembled in mass to take care of all these survivors, and there were only 2 of us. I felt an outpouring of compassion that, again, I will never forget. Over time, my body healed, but my emotions were still wounded, and even to this day, there are some things that I still struggle with. In the hospital, I had a severe case of survival guilt. I had thought many times that I wished I had died. I said that to the nursing staff. Dr. Andrew Lovey came to me finally and explained to me that, you know, you had a broken hip and you were lucky to get out. If you had taken the time to wrestle people out of their seat belts and drag them to that opening in the side of the plane and throw them out 14 feet down below, and by then the burning fuel was right there where Wendy landed. I just barely missed it. They would have been burned, and if they weren't dead before, that would have killed them. But you know, I still struggled with the idea that maybe I should have died trying. Maybe I should have given it everything I had, and I didn't. And that still bothers me today. I'm sorry. I wanted to say this a long time ago, and now I've had the opportunity to say it. But I'm so grateful for this institution, for their compassion that they showed to me and to Wendy. This institution is famous for compassion, for physicians who are able to put hands on people and talk to them and give them some care and compassion that they need so much. You know, when I was about 3 weeks ago, I left American Samoa. My wife had been missionaries down there. There was a man down there I grew to love very much. He's He's the son of Methodist ministers, a man who is what they call a talking chief, a very high talking chief in American Samoa. And I asked him on one occasion when I was there to teach me something, some kind of a Samoan saying that would be interesting for me to learn. And I hadn't known him very long, and he told me this. He said, this is what I want you to learn. E motu so'o papa ai le motu sia so'o tangata, which in English means the bonds that hold big rocks together may break, but the bonds that hold people together will never break. And I thought about that later, and I thought this man with a tremendous repertoire of things he could talk about the ocean and the sea and the fish and the mountains and people, he said something, he wanted me to learn something that reflected fellowship between us, that our bonds would never break. But you know, there's more to it than that. That country, as well as throughout the world, believe in these bonds that hold us together. We believe that we will see those people again, and that those bonds will never truly be broken. And I truly believe that. I want to applaud KCOM, ATSU, and I still call it KCOM because I'm an old timer and I have a hard time changing, but this is an institution I'm very proud to have been associated with. I applaud them for putting on a program on compassion, something which is sorely needed in our society today with the way things are in our world, with indifference and people being so selfish about their own personal things in the world. I applaud you for that. I applaud President Phelps for his and his staff's program that they've put together here. And I thank you for being here and for honoring these good people. And I thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Dr. Krogh, we're glad you're here today. Dr. Rice, hi. I just saw you back there. Good to see you. Hi, Mary. Thank you for coming too. About 2.5 years ago, we thought, how do we remember this? How do we grow from this? How do we make sense of it? And how do we put something in the community that reminds us of what Dr. Krogh said about the bonds and honors those individuals that perished in a way that's meaningful. And so today you see this wonderful flagpole, which wasn't part of the IPE design at all. But thanks to Virginia, Lori Haxton, and a committee that got together over the 2 years, really thought about what would be a meaningful way to do this. We have this new flag and this new pole. It's a little different than our other flags and poles on campuses in that there are lights that will show all night and all day, so this flag can be up every day 24/7 with a light shining on it, providing the weather's appropriate. And this is something that we feel that our campus will appreciate, but also those in the community will appreciate. We'll have a plaque also that talks about the individuals and the tragedy and celebrate their short-lived lives. At this time, we welcome ATSU's a cappella group, the Medleys, to perform America the Beautiful. And we also have USA students Matt Wold and Cassandra Beard who will help raise the flag as the Medleys sing for us.
Beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America. God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you'll be happy to know that in 2005, Kirksville changed. ATSU changed. After the crash, students and staff at ATSU gathered to hear about compassion, talk about compassion, and demonstrate compassion in the Kirksville community. Their actions influenced many other osteopathic medical students around the country to hold their own compassion celebrations, which included performing community activities, outreach programs, and creating awareness of the osteopathic medical profession. Today's celebration is as much about the future as it is about the past. Let us use this ceremony as a reminder of our original intent to place more emphasis on a healthcare provider's personal relationship with patients, and to re-examine the progress we have made in the past 10 years to make our campus and community more compassionate and relationship-centered. Let us also continue to extend the same to the communities in which we all live and serve. Thank you all for being here today.